Wow, it's been an inspirational morning so far. Margie's really inspired me this morning. And I'm really looking forward to, over the next few days, being even more inspired and learning more about women's leadership and bridging the gender gap. But before we go forward, I'd like to take a moment just to look back a little bit. So let's take a deep breath. Let's all close our eyes and let's imagine that we're not in 2018, but we've gone back over 100 years. What was it like to be a woman 100 years ago? Maybe you're like my grandmother, married at 15, 2 kids at 18, very limited education, no income of her own, no money, very few rights of her own. She couldn't vote. Even to open a bank account, she needed her husband's permission. So when you think of that, now let's open our eyes and we're back in 2018. And really, we've come a long way since then. For starters, women are far more educated than ever before. In fact, in several countries across Asia, from Sri Lanka to Singapore, female graduates actually outnumber the number of male graduates. And of course, there are more and more women in paid jobs than ever before. In Southeast Asia and East Asia, South Asia is not as good, but there are almost 60% of women in the labor force. And in some countries like Cambodia, almost 80% of women are in paid jobs. So that's really great, right? And we've really made a lot of progress, and I think we almost deserve a round of applause for that. But, and there's always a but. If we look closely, there's still a problem, and that is there are still women missing from the top of leadership positions. Ellen mentioned earlier today about a recent McKinsey report that was taken out on Asia Pacific a few months ago, and according to that report, for every 4 men in leadership positions in Asia, there are still only 1 woman. And this is a universal problem across the region. It doesn't matter which culture, there are different cultures in different countries. Some countries are rich, some countries are poor, some countries have large populations, some are less populated. In some countries, women are more educated than in others. But one thing remains common. There are still too few women at the top in work, in employment, in the workplaces. To take the same McKinsey report, in highly developed Japan, for instance, there are only 3% of women as board members. And in vastly populated China and Indonesia, only 2% of women are CEOs. So clearly, we need to do something about it. So the next question that comes to our mind, is what is more worrying is that actually, instead of going forwards over the next few years, we've actually been going backwards. Some of you may have heard about the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, which tracks progress in gender equality in indicators like health, education, employment, and political participation. And what they said is in the last few years, progress has actually reversed. And in the workplace, in particular, in terms of economic opportunity, they estimate that globally, it'll take over 200 years to get equality in the workplace. So forget our daughters. It looks like even our granddaughters may not see gender equality in their lifetimes. And in Asia, that is not a typo. In South Asia, in 2016, they estimate it'll take over 1,000 years. Now, this is for 2016, but in 2017, I was looking at the figures for 2017. India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, some of the biggest South Asian economies, they've actually slipped in gender equality. So it's looking pretty depressing. And, it almost makes you want to weep, right? What's going to happen? How long is it going to take us? What more do we need to do? And then the question is, why? What's happening? We're educated. We're going into work. So what's stopping women? So obviously, you heard a lot about it. Margie mentioned it. Ellen mentioned it. There's a lot of reasons for this. It could be gender discrimination, outright discrimination. It could be lack of female role models. It could be, just cultural attitudes. But because I'm a researcher, as Christine mentioned, I started looking through all the different studies and the reasons that have come up about women's equality. And one word kept coming up again and again, and that was care. And to be exact, unpaid care. Even now, even though women have entered the workplace, we're getting into paid jobs, women still do more of what they call the unpaid work. That includes looking after children, looking after older people, cooking, cleaning, all the other chores, far more than men. And in the Asia-Pacific region, women do 4 times more unpaid work than care work than men. In fact, apparently, men in Asia do the least amount of care work when you compare it to men across the world. So this is probably one of the biggest sticking points. And clearly, even though women are coming in, some things have changed. We've entered work, we're educated, but some things never change. As Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo, said in one of her famous interviews, you may be the CEO of PepsiCo, but when you get home, you're still told to go and get the milk, right? And what happens then? In workplaces today, McKinsey calls it, workplaces here demand that women are committed to work anytime, anywhere. You have to be available 24/7. And really, when you have this, what you call, you're still working 4 hours a day on unpaid care work, it really becomes hard for women to juggle both. Then what happens? Inevitably, women either step back, they switch to part-time work, they reduce the number of hours they work, or they drop out altogether. And then the end result of that is that you end up with fewer women in the leadership positions. In fact, a survey done by the International Labour Organization a few years ago said that they found that unpaid care work is probably the biggest barrier to women joining the workforce, remaining in the workforce, and also progressing in the workforce, right? So what happens? Like, to take an example, in India, the same report that showed that women do 4 times more care work in India than men. In India, men spend a mere 31 minutes a day on housework and care work compared to 4 hours of women. And is it any wonder, when that's the unequal division of labor at home, that 80% of women in a recent survey done by a newspaper said that they were thinking of quitting their jobs because of childcare responsibilities. And I saw this again and again. This is an example that I got. I met Jayanti during my PhD research on women in the banking sector. Now, Jayanti, when I met her, was what you would call a star performer. She was on the road to success. I met her mentor, who was actually male, who was saying she'd got, I think, 3 or 4 promotions in 4 years. She'd been just getting one promotion after the other, and they'd earmarked her. She was, as he said in his words, he could see her being a CEO of a bank in the future. She was extremely bright, extremely committed, very hardworking, and ambitious as well. But even then, despite that, when I met her, when I spoke to her, she said to me, I'm thinking of quitting because my job is like a pressure cooker. It's not just the physical fatigue, it's also the mental fatigue. I can't manage the childcare and the work. So there's going to come to a day when I'm just going to be, fed up of all this, and I'm just going to quit. And there you go, there's one less future CEO of the women banking sector. And that was just one woman. That was repeated in several of the interviews again and again. It always was a pressure, and they just felt, I can't take it, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to stay on the ramp. But the problem is, it's not just about childcare. Now, I work here as a research fellow with older persons, and I had a colleague telling me an example of another woman. I've named her Yuyan. She had been working in a company. She's Singaporean. She's single. So that means she has no kids, and she's not married. She has no sort of other care responsibilities, childcare responsibilities. And she'd been working in this company for about 20 years. And then her mother fell sick. She's the only child. And so she decided that she needed to look after her mother, so she went part-time. But when she went part-time, even after going part-time, her mother went even more sick. She couldn't walk. She needed a lot of daily help. She realized she was finding it hard even to manage her part-time work with caring for her mother. So she quit. She retired early. And as a consequence, and I really see that, some of us, not all of us, will have kids, but almost all of us have parents. We've got aunts, we've got uncles, we've got older siblings. And as they get older, someone's going to need to take care of them. And unless things change, unless that sort of unequal division of care changes, it will probably be women. And then what will end up is it'll be a lot more women like Yuan. And in Asia, I really see this as a big issue for women in Asia, because Asia is one of the most rapidly aging populations in the world. And as I said, unless things change, it will be women who will be taking time out. Nobody's really thinking about what's going to happen. Who's going to take care of these older women as people get older and older? So the question is, and even if, like a lot of us here in Singapore, and I think some of you in Hong Kong or India, we're lucky enough maybe to have help, extra help, domestic help to help us with some of the everyday chores, or even supportive husbands, like Margie mentioned in her thing, who sometimes take care of the household chores. the physical responsibilities, studies have shown that women still take on what they call the mental load. It's those, everyday organizational things, the list taking, the grocery lists, the homework, the tuitions, all the little things. I mean, I do it. Before coming here, I was making lists, I was organizing my kids' tuitions, and it's exhausting. And so a lot of women just find even this is too hard, and then it's too hard to combine that with work. And then this inevitable result is they step back. So what can we do? What is this, and how can we change it? How can we fix this? One of the problems, and Margie mentioned this, is workplaces, or rather, we still live in a man's world. And workplaces in particular have been designed by and for men. It does not acknowledge that women have other responsibilities outside the work. So for gender equality, we really need to change the rules. We need to change the way we think about work. What that means in practice. And I'm going to quote a study done by a researcher called Jenny Klugman. And she said, gender equality doesn't mean that all women should participate in the workplace instead of staying at home. Rather, it signifies that men and women should have an equal range of choices. That means it means valuing care as much as valuing work, and to realize that care and work are two sides of the same coin, and they actually reinforce each other. Workplaces need to change and accommodate this, and realize that both men and women, not just women, but it's not just women's responsibility, it's also men's responsibility. And we need to sort of change this. In Singapore, as a lot of you who live here, you'll know we love our acronyms: POE, MRT, CIE, COE, name it, MOE, we always CPF. Every day we've got acronyms. And I think I've been living here for too long because I came up with my own acronym for this. I called it CCC. Let's change the culture around care, right? So how are we going to do this? The first thing I think is we've heard a lot about male champions for change, he for she, mentors who will support you, and all that. But I really propose also what I've called a she for he. We need to celebrate all those men who are trying to shatter the gender stereotypes, so going against the trend. Whether it's a stay-at-home dad who says that he's going to stay at home while his wife goes out and pursues his career, or the fathers who actually take up the full extent of their paternity leave. I came across another study, and I'm not sure about the data, which is why I didn't put it there, but it's probably correct. In Japan, men are entitled to paternity leave, but only 3% of them actually take it up. So we really need to change that culture. We need to make sure that men also are, it's not just women who are considered the main caregivers. I was at a seminar of senior executives once, and they candidly admitted that the reason that they were so highly, had reached the sort of point in their careers was because their husbands had decided and sort of agreed to stay at home. They'd come to Singapore and quit their jobs, come to Singapore, and they were looking after their kids while the women went to work. And the women were saying every day their husbands get asked, "Oh my God, why did you do it?" And this is from both men and women. "Why did you do it? How do you feel? Do you feel bad about quitting your career?" And the women were saying, if the roles had been reversed and I'd left my job and come to Singapore, no one would have even raised an eyebrow. And we need to change that concept. We need to make it the norm. Whether it's a man or a woman, care and work are just part of, as I said, two of the same coin responsibilities. The second thing is, and as Anne-Marie Slaughter said, let's make caregiving cool for the guys. The second thing, and Margie mentioned it and spoke about it so brilliantly earlier on in the morning, that I almost feel I don't need to talk about it anymore. You need to mind your language and your attitude. Too often, as women, we downplay our care roles in the workplace because we're scared. We're scared to be seen as less committed. We think that we're not going to be seen that we're not going to be seen as being as committed to our jobs, or we're not going to do our work properly because we're distracted by our care responsibilities. I was at a seminar by a senior executive from Facebook, and she said exactly the things that Margie said this morning. She said, don't apologize for your choices. Remember, your language, the way you say things, makes a powerful difference. She says she takes 2 hours off in the evening at 5 o'clock to go home to take care of her kids, give them a bath, and put them to bed. When she goes, she says, most women would say this. When they leave, they'll go, "Hi, guys, I'm really sorry. I'm leaving at 5. But, I'm really, really sorry. I've got to go for a few hours now. I hope you don't mind. I hope it's okay. It's not going to cause you all too many problems. But I'm really sorry. I've got to go." What does she do? She says, hello team, I'm leaving now, I'm going off, I'm going to be offline from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. I'll be back at my desk at 7, I will check my emails then. If there's any other pending work, I will take care of it, then I will get the work done. And that's what she said. Don't apologize for your choices, set your limits, and just make it clear you will still get your work done. Right? And it really makes a powerful difference. And I caught myself doing that the other day. My boss asked to change a meeting from 10 to 11. And this is me. I've been reading all this and being inspired. And what did I say to her in the email? I said, oh yes, I can come at 11, but I'm really sorry. I've got to leave at 12 because I've got to pick up my daughter from school. And I'm really, really sorry. Is it okay? I hope you don't mind. Oh my God, the hand-wringing. I read my email after and I was thinking, what was I doing? I should have just said, I'm sorry, I can be there at 11, I'll have to leave at 12 to pick up my daughter. If we can't finish everything that we need to discuss in that hour, I can come back at 2 and we can continue from there. No, even I did it. But so we really need to be aware, as Margie was saying, every day we need to remember the power of our language because that changes things. Linked to that as well is really this whole issue. I think you called it benevolent sexism, Margie, and other words for this is unconscious bias. We need to cut out the assumptions. When I was doing my research, for instance, I met Tara, who was a senior manager. She was in line for a promotion that would have got her but to take that promotion, she would have had to relocate from Delhi to Mumbai. And guess what? She was qualified, she had the requisite amount of experience. Her boss never put her name down on the list. Why? He said, oh, your husband is working here, you've got young kids, your family's here. You're not going to be able to move. I just assumed that you wouldn't want the job. So but thankfully, Tara actually called it out. She went and asked him, why didn't you put my name on the list? And when he told her this, she said, no, I want to move. I want to take this promotion. And that story had a happy ending because he said, okay, and he didn't even realize that he was doing it. So he actually then put her name back in and she got the promotion and she moved to Mumbai. But unless you do that, you call it out, there's going to be changes. Finally, we need to build a business case for care. We need to make businesses aware that it's actually good for them to invest in accommodating care issues in the workplace. And as I mentioned, it is going to be a serious issue in the future. We've probably all heard of McKinsey's statement about how if there's gender equality in the workplace, it's going to add 4.5 trillion to Asia's GDP by 2025. But do you know, if you put a dollar value to all that work, that unpaid care work that women do every day, it would actually add 3.8 trillion to the region's GDP, or 15% of the entire output of this region. But more importantly than that, actually, for businesses immediately, it costs them when women leave the workplace. I came across this headline in the UK where it said dementia time bomb set to cost 3 billion as people leave work to care for relatives. You could really substitute that for anything, Alzheimer's, elder care, childcare. As people leave the workplace, it costs businesses. I read somewhere that in US law firms, if you want to replace a second-year associate, it costs between $200,000 and $300,000. Now that's a lot of money. And it could be avoided if the workplaces changed, if businesses actually invested and recognized and accommodated women's caregiving pressures, and actually men as well, so that there's a time when it's accommodated that women don't quit because of these responsibilities. And I think if all this is done together, we can make a change. If right now, currently, the way workplaces are designed is that to reach the top, we need to be available anytime, anywhere. We need to start pressing for progress anytime, anywhere. And we need to start now. So I'm going to end to inspire you from this video from EY, which says, let's start, let's press for progress, let's change things today, anytime, anywhere.